Hi everybody. So here I have the Invisible Light Tarot, which I finally purchased from one of our friends here, secondhand, at less than retail, out of curiosity, because I have been very curious about this deck for a long time now. Some of the images really appeal to me, but others make me feel like I am an outsider looking in, which in itself is not a problem for me, because most of my life I have to be using other people's frame of reference in this life, because that's just the way life rolls, and so I do not have a problem with that. I am used to it. It doesn't compromise my sense of self or anything like that. However, this particular deck really does make me feel like I'm an outsider crashing in someone else's party uninvited, and I've used that expression before for a variety of other decks. But I had the opportunity to purchase slightly below retail, so I decided to get it and see what it's about. First of all, I would like to apologize for a bit of chaos on this dining table here, which has effectively been repurposed to become my filming area. But I'm in the process of reorganizing my house, and as you probably heard me say before, I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle here. Just changing one corner of the house means that the whole house is in chaos. So anyway, this is onto the deck. The box is quite lovely, and given that this is secondhand, there's a bit of air bubble here, so it doesn't bother me much. The back is like so, consisting of translated through photographic images by Brandy Eve Allen. Comes with original card and guidebook. So I suspect, if I'm not mistaken, these images are pre-existing. So Brandy Eve Allen is a photographer, if I understand that correctly, and so this is part of her portfolio. So the box come off like a shelf like so, which I thought was quite neat. So we have 78 cards. So the box pretty basic, pretty good. I quite like the simplicity of it. Backs like that is not ideal for me with samples of cards, but apparently it's necessary sometimes for sales purposes. And so let us start with the cardstock first. It's matte, and it is quite lovely to shuffle, but both book and deck. It is a little bendy. It curved like so. It bows a little bit, so that the top layer obviously shrank in a faster pace than the bottom layer here. That's the back. Shuffles really quite nicely. So I can shuffle this way. I haven't riffle shuffled this. It doesn't feel like a riffle shuffle kind of deck for me. I tend to overhand shuffle anyway, except for certain cardstock which really invites us to riffle shuffle them. So this reminds me of the mattness of the Wild Unknown, which is quite nice. Matte and smooth. So some matte lamination does prevent smooth shuffling, but this one doesn't. It's quite lovely, really waxy to smooth to shuffle against each other. So I'm going to flip through this particular minors first as I talk through my thoughts. And so this is more my speed, this kind of sort of abstract faceless figures, 8 of air. This as well. There's artistic nudity here or something like this. But when it's close up and when the faces are clear, it does make me feel like I am too old and I'm from the wrong demographic to be participating in this visual conversation. However, speaking of visual conversation, the images to me doesn't so much depict the archetype of the tarot, other than coming across like a visual commentary on the archetype of the tarot. So if you see this, it feels like it's not showing us or telling us what Two of Fire is, but it's almost as if it feels to me like this is a visual commentary on what the Two of Fire is about. So it's like a step further. In that sense, it reminds me of the Ophidia Rosa with their proses, with the poem, with the sonnets, not sonnets, with the haiku or the couplets. As the Ophidia Rosa with the couplets and the poems, this is with the visual. And so this is one of those images that really stayed with me and that really made me want to try on this deck. Is this one here, this image of Two of Air. And so again, my most favorite images are the faceless, more abstract ones like this and like that, instead of the close-up, really clear images of faces. And so here, Ten of Air, you can see that the infrastructure here is definitely Rider-Waite-Smith. This is the Three of Air, Two of Earth. So it goes straight to the element, which is good. Seven of Fire. And judging from the images, air is swords, fire is staves, water is cups, and earth is coins. So I'm not going to show you all, I just want to show you enough to get a sense of what this deck is like, or what the voice of this deck is like. Let me show you the majors first. So that's the Fool. And you can see this person here. This person here feels very specific in her demographic, in her demographical group. And having said that, I do not want people to judge me based on my appearance, and so I do not want to judge people or presume to know, you know, or make a judgment about what kind of a person someone is based on their experience, based on the skin, their skin color, their hair color, their body shape, or the way they dress. So I am very aware of that. So I quite like this sort of more blurry, reminds me of the abyssal, the underwater photography. This is High Priestess, the Empress. Now the Empress and the Emperor is very sort of this creative forces, this sort of very bedroom feel to it. The pendulous half exposed breast over here, and there is this man in bed, and you know, you could argue that perhaps his half exposed pendulous something could have been shown just so that we are equal in our exposure of, you know, our reproductive parts here. And there is the sense of the creative forces, the Emperor and the Empress, the King and Queen of the creative forces in the physical sense. And so that's an interesting way of looking at the Emperor and the Empress. Definitely not how I've looked at them so far. This is the Hierophant. I really like this faceless ones, and in particular Lovers. Chariot, command over opposing forces. I suppose if you're on water, but this is like a water, but they're on land instead of on water, so that's interesting. Perhaps there's some things to be read in that. Water, air, commanding over two opposing forces. Strength with a big scar along her back there, along her backbone. So that's vertebrae. That's very, very powerful. The Hermit. Wheel of Fortune. Justice. I think she's carrying a kind of plant that is suggestive of a wing or a pair of wings from the sides. That might be on purpose, it might not, it might just be me, but I quite like it. Hanged Man. The Hanged Man is actually a woman because I could see the breasts there. Death. Temperance. Land, water. Devil, pretty straightforward. The Tower, the creation, human creation, the decay of human creation there. Star. Moon. Sun, there's sense of positive, negative there, the moon and the sun. That's definitely a negative, the figure being white, that figure is in silhouette black. Sun over here and there's darkness over here, so I quite like that juxtaposition. Judgment, again, there is this sense of the two, almost like the wings of an angel, that call to awakening. Judgment is a call to awakening to a new reality. And that fence suggestive of that old and new, so I quite like that. And that's the World. And so let's take a look at the courts. So the kings, I am usually looking for patterns in court cards, and I really don't see any. So King of Earth, King of Air, which is Sword, King of Water, that's the Cups, and King of Fire. I'm not quite sure what to say about these images because for now they don't really say anything to me other than whatever your understanding of the Queen of Water, Queen of Earth, Queen of Air, and Queen of Fire, and then you look at the image, and hopefully that image can complement or serve as a commentary on your own pre-existing understanding of what the Queen of Earth might mean. So instead of depicting the Queen of Earth straightforwardly, or it is more like a side note almost. They feel more like a footnote, like an addendum, or like an illustration, or like a further comment to your pre-existing understanding of the queens. Same with the knights. Knight of Water, Knight of Earth, except for the horses there. These two doesn't have any horses. Knight of Fire, Knight of Air, Knight of Air, Knight of Swords. I keep thinking about the phrase running with scissors whenever I see Knight of Air or Knight of Swords. And of course the book talk about Knight of Swords, which I thought was interesting because the title of the card is Knight of Air, and it's a little odd that the book suddenly talk about the Knight of Swords, because the word swords haven't been used. So Knight of Air, Knight of Swords there, and then so it's not the most systematic book. King of Swords here. So there isn't any I mean, it's assumed that we know that the air is swords, but the thing is, some people, do not attribute air to staffs, for example. So there is that presumption, which is fine because I see the elements and the suits association exactly the way the creator have seen it. The other thing about the booklet, though, is that here in the Five of Earth, people think the shop is closed and you're missing out on opportunities that could bring relief. You are missing out on opportunities. It should be, what do you call it, that contraction, like U apostrophe R-E. The contraction for you are is your. Here it's Y-O-U-R, as in the possessive adjective, as in your socks, your head, your lunch, your, and it should be U apostrophe R-E for you are. So I find that a little disappointing because that's really basic mistake that could have been picked up during the editing process. So that's the Five of Earth again. Just looking at the pictures, I do not think, at least I can't see any direct association. But as a side note, or as a visual commentary, and I apologize for repeating myself, but as a visual commentary to the tarot archetypes or to the tarot cards, each of them provide quite an interesting point of reflections as we unearth our own understanding of each of these cards and then combine them with these pictures to give birth to ideas and insights. So I checked the handbook. The Ace of Fire is a typical, initiation of action. For example, Ace of Fire, and there's this man here. And so, he doesn't necessarily explicitly depict anything about the initiation of action, the start of action. But you can see this man and think about an initiation of action or the start or the spark of action, and then, take it from there, I suppose. Page of Water. So artistic nudities everywhere, of course. And so that's that. And yeah, so overall a really interesting deck. Quite nice to shuffle, really great cardstock, except for the little bowing here, a little bend, a little curving like a this way, with the top layer I think contracting or perhaps shrinking at a faster rate than the bottom layer. Great photography, reminds me of the Abyssal Tarot somewhat, but also in a way it reads, reminds me a bit of the Ophidia Rosa, where you don't necessarily get anything directly from the images. But if you sort of take the images aside and then use that as a complement to your own existing understanding of each of the cards that lies inside your head, and working with whatever you have inside your head, The images are quite nifty, are quite produce some interesting insights and some interesting readings. But if you expect your cards to explicitly and directly show you or tell you what each of the card is, then this might not be for you. But if you like the indirect approach, the sidestep approach of the Ophidia Rosa, and if you like the insight-seeking journey that you might might be offered by the Abyssal Tarot, this might be something that you might want to experiment with. So that's me, and I'll talk to you guys later.